Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Saturday edition of Newsflash. Time for Newsflash, episode 314. On the show, we react to a tragic shooting in Virginia Beach at a municipal center where 12 were killed. We're also going to talk about a trade war that could be spreading to Mexico. Is this what Trump wants, or is it a bad idea? Oh, it is what Trump wants. The question is, what Elizabeth Warren proposes an interesting new idea to beat Donald Trump. Does it work? We'll take a look at her case for being president. Interesting bipartisan cooperation on something good between AOC and Ted Cruz. We'll talk about that. Take a look at Kirsten Gillibrand, who's still running for president. We'll take a look at Joe Biden, the 2020 race, and so much more. Oh, with our good friend joining us once again on the show, David Langan. David, thank you so much for coming back on tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Spencer.
All right. We are going to be starting off today with the tragedy that took place yesterday in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It was turned into a scene of carnage on Friday afternoon to give you the idea of what happened here. After a longtime public utilities employee began firing indiscriminately at his coworkers with a handgun, authorities said, killing a dozen people and injuring several others before dying in an extended shootout with the police. It had been nearly closing time around there at the office when Dwayne Craddock began stalking through several floors and firing at his colleagues. He seemed to be somewhat disgruntled about the work. He kind of didn't like his colleagues or something like that. Just obviously a horrible situation that took place. What was your reaction on the events of yesterday?
My first reaction was, well, the first thing I wondered was what weapon he used. It turns out to have been a handgun.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I wondered was how I didn't assume that it would be terrorism. It felt like a gun violence, like another lunatic with a weapon. And of course, the first thing you think of is poor people show up at work and die. And that doesn't seem like a fair bargain at all.
Yeah, it's really kind of incredible to think that that is the reality, especially for a lot of people in America, because these things just happen so often in our country. They're just it's you could show up to work, you could show up to school, could show up to maybe like a sporting event, maybe from the Paris attacks. But I mean, yeah, there's guns really seem to be very present in our country, and obviously, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. Obviously, is the discussion that happens seemingly every time for maybe a few days, sometimes a few hours, a very short amount of time. We just gone through this very very systematic cycle about the possibility of gun control, or maybe that doesn't work. And so how do you think? I mean, maybe you're not exactly for some sort of gun control. I'm not, and personally, in my opinion, I mean, I'm saying we have to go full Australia and start destroying guns. But I think a large portion of the country would be really for some sort of at least basic regulations. I don't even think the bump stock ban that was proposed went through successfully, if I remember correctly, or it's being challenged.
The gun stock ban was just ridiculous and symbolic. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And I understand. Yes, you're taking a semi-automatic weapon and basically creating a fairly inaccurate automatic weapon. But when you're shooting into throngs of people, it doesn't much matter. I mean, fine, you can ban bump stocks. Never should have been a device created in the first place.
Yeah. But
to get to realistic gun control, you're going to have to get past the politics of it all. I mean, Americans are sensible. Their politicians are politicians.
Yeah.
So what you and I could easily agree on will never happen, because you've got the extremes on both sides ruling the parties when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, and I think you definitely not only a lot of extremes, but you got a lot of outside interests contributing to the situation that like really don't represent the broad perspective of Americans here.
No, I agree. It's you're either stuck with, as you mentioned, confiscating guns, or never regulating them at all.
Yeah.
Left, but political parties do this to every issue. This isn't unique, right? This is the same thing happens for immigration. It happens for social safety net programs. It happens in everything. There's no such thing as a nonpartisan issue.
Yeah, that is very true. Like, there's strong arguments that like a lot of people feel passionately about, and I mean, honestly though, this is the crazy thing. If you really look at some of the numbers, like there's a lot of misinformation out there that like everyone supports, like at least on the liberal side, like that everyone supports just confiscating guns. But I mean, honestly, if you really want to hear, and I mean, this may be a little bit cynical, but like I guess you could say to the politicians, if you come together now and you say, okay, this is going to be why don't we just agree to some kind of common sense legislation here on this? Like, it's something that, I mean, Trump, for example, after the Parkland shooting, he's like, I want to do some regulation on this. But then somehow I think he had, I feel like, a few meetings with the NRA, and then he was like, never, it's not going to happen. Like, it's kind of incredible how quickly that changes. But I think if they come together and just pass something, just literally anything, in the way of some substantive form of regulation, like universal background checks, maybe even like assault weapons ban, like they could be, this is, again, as I said, a little bit cynical, like they could be the generation that was remembered as the politician that actually finally stood up to a very old and problematic issue and solve the problem. Like, that would be like, they could be heralded as that, but I don't know.
I'm shocked. It reminds me of the Casablanca. Shutting down this establishment for gambling. Sir, your winnings. There are no. These people love to talk about solving a problem, and they're they're pandering always to a base, to whether it's a moneyed few or it's to industry, particular industries that exist intensively in an individual state. There's always going to be someone who's got enough power, enough sway to at least prohibit progress. And that's what I see in gun control. Yes, you said background check, universal background check. I see nothing wrong with that. I don't think that gets in the way of anyone owning a firearm.
Yeah.
But if I say that to an NRA member, that's just sacrilege. A universal background check. Although I suspect that enough NRA members,
even that,
would like to see some better background research on individuals, and maybe that takes longer. But if it takes 30 days or more, that's a problem for some reason. I don't know.
Interestingly enough, when this is from pollingreport.com, and just look this up now. Do you support or oppose requiring background checks for all gun buyers? And this is Republicans say 92% support, Democrats say 98%, and Independents say 94%. So it's like incredibly strong.
Right. Yeah. And it comes down to the details, and then the manufacturers don't necessarily want to make it harder to obtain a weapon, right?
Yeah, and they have a lot of sway with the NRA, which has a lot of sway with the government.
Yeah.
And this is also pretty interesting. It speaks to the kind of misinformation, like the confusion a lot of people have about this. Do you support or oppose stricter gun laws in the United States? 32% of Republicans support, 91% of Democrats support, and 59% of independents. So like it just shows you there's kind of like a interesting like cognitive dissonance that like is you're not like really sure what the gun laws would entail.
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so like that's all very interesting, and it's kind of hard to see how like what do you think has to happen for there to be some kind of change on this front?
If we haven't seen it yet, I don't know what it is. I mean,
Yeah,
I had this conversation with I believe in the Second Amendment. I really do. And it's it's simple. I mean, any device. In Japan last week, someone rampaged through a crowd with knives and killed a bunch of schoolgirls and a teacher. I mean, people will kill people.
yeah, that's true.
That's just how it is. Uh, but there's there's no and those are separate issues. Those are mental health issues as well, which we do a pretty bad job
Yes,
of
yes, yes.
of managing. But the if we haven't seen uh, enough murder and massacre by people who should not own firearms or should not have firearms, I don't see where the motivation is going to come from. It,
Yeah,
it's
it's hard to see like if it hasn't happened by now, like when will it happen? That's the
I agree. This is one of these. Uh, a gun is a tool, right? They're like any other tool. Like a hammer is a tool. I could beat you to death with a hammer, right? They're all tools. They just so happens that a weapon is a more powerful tool. Um, Having the tool in the right hands is important. And if that takes, for someone wait a little longer, that doesn't seem to me to be a problem. I understand when people are waiting an inordinate amount of time, and there are so many restrictions on the weapon. You can't. It's got to stay in your house, or it's got to stay in your firing range, or you can't loan it to your own son for him, a shotgun for him to go hunting. That would become a federal crime under some of these bills. I mean, there are some things that are ridiculous and posturing, and some things that make sense. But it's hard to get to the things that make sense.
yeah, and it's definitely kind of tough to hammer out that kind of issue. But I do get interesting thing about what you're saying is like, oh, there's like a lot of knife crime in Britain. But I mean, again, I think it's like there is obviously there's going to be crime, like people are going to kill people, all that kind of stuff. But like, it just does certainly make sense, in my opinion, at least, to take away the biggest kind of weapon for people to do so. Like, you just want to limit their capacity. Like while that may be like while the reality of like knife crime stuff like that may exist, I think that doesn't kind of take away at all from the logic of really getting rid of guns, because they can make damage a lot worse in a lot quicker time.
No, I agree, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm not assuming that no one should have those weapons. What I'm saying is that people who will not people who won't use them for nefarious purposes should be able to have them.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly.
And if it takes longer for someone to be vetted for that, that should be okay with everybody. But just like any political event, you're going to have people on both sides who are never ever going to give an inch.
What really kind of amazes me is like how much of a culture kind of thing this is, and it's all about where you grow up. Because like if you grow up in like one part of our country, like I've like lived in obviously New York my entire life, and it's like I don't like know that much about guns. But I mean, if you live in a place like I don't know, like Texas or something like that, you may have a much bigger connection to guns in your life, and you may be able to like you may know more about them, and B, like get a closer connection, because that's kind of been an interesting thing for me. It's like going and like hearing more about this. It's like it's definitely an interesting thing. So I mean, I do think there should be some kind of like baseline restriction